Morning. It is an honor to be here with you and represent the municipality of Guatemala and Mayor Ricardo Quiñones. I will present the proposal of Distritos de Oportunidad or Opportunity Districts, which seeks the urban and economic development of Guatemala City. The video, I will present, first of all, a video that will introduce the subject. My English is not very fluent, so I will rely on my notes. Please, the video.
Cada día, desde muy temprano, la ciudad de Guatemala atiende a 3.5 millones de ciudadanos que trabajan, estudian y buscan generar oportunidades en este centro urbano tan concurrido, que provee los servicios públicos y la infraestructura accesible que se necesita para mantenerse en constante movimiento. La ciudad se esmera las 24 horas del día para cumplir con los altos requerimientos de servicios de sus habitantes, enfrentando los desafíos de los altos flujos de personas y de mercaderías que demanda el acelerado proceso de urbanización, y brindando facilidades para estudiar, desarrollarse y progresar, además de proveer los espacios públicos para la interacción y la recreación, que mejoran la calidad de vida de sus habitantes. El equipo de la Municipalidad de Guatemala trabaja constantemente, esforzándose para lograr un modelo de desarrollo ordenado, planificando la ciudad del futuro y construyendo la ciudad para vivir, donde las personas y las familias importan.
El propósito de todas estas acciones es buscar mejorar la calidad de vida. Una calidad de vida que promueva y que logre oportunidades especialmente para los más jóvenes, que priorice la generación del empleo y que logre que todo este esfuerzo de urbanización y de desarrollo pueda ser sostenible hacia el futuro. La posición geográfica de la ciudad de Guatemala resulta del cruce de 4 caminos. Son 4 caminos estratégicos para la logística del comercio, para los servicios y especialmente para la industria. Y es que dentro de este plan que estamos ejecutando se contempla una visión a futuro de la ciudad de Guatemala. Una visión donde hay áreas potenciales de desarrollo. De los 228 kilómetros cuadrados que tiene de extensión territorial esta ciudad, al día de hoy hemos urbanizado un 40%. Es el 40% donde vivimos hoy, es el área núcleo de la ciudad. Hay otro 40% del territorio que está destinado como área verde. Es el lugar donde vamos a formar un cinturón ecológico de la ciudad de Guatemala. Resta un 20%. Este 20% es donde se contempla la urbanización del futuro. Será donde se desarrollen estos nuevos distritos de oportunidad. Y se trata de que los distritos de oportunidad sean territorios de innovación dentro de la ciudad, que nos permitan plantear una ciudad que utiliza como base la práctica de la sostenibilidad. También se trata de dinamizar las oportunidades y el empleo, y se trata también de impulsar un entorno donde exista un cinturón de desarrollo que propicie el acceso a la vivienda digna. Una vivienda que haga alcanzar ese sueño de un hogar propio a miles de familias de la ciudad de Guatemala. También se visualiza que en este 20% del territorio se reoriente la mayor cantidad de la construcción en los próximos 30 años. Mientras todo esto sucede, seguiremos trabajando con fuerza para mantener y sostener y potenciar este 40% del territorio donde actualmente vivimos, en un esfuerzo de mejora continua. Para el desarrollo de los nuevos distritos se suma la importancia del impulso de proyectos habilitadores. Los 5 proyectos habilitadores son la vivienda accesible, el aerometro, el eje norte-sur sobre la línea férrea, la construcción del puente de Belice II, la ejecución de un conjunto de pasos a desnivel que viabilicen todo este esfuerzo de movilidad interna en la ciudad de Guatemala. Esta nueva forma de planificación es el resultado que planteamos ante la metrópoli que crece, y para cumplir con el deseo de los capitalinos de vivir cerca de nuestras familias y de los nuestros. Este plan es también el resultado de la participación de vecinos, del involucramiento de instituciones, de la academia y de múltiples actores que se comprometen y que cumplen, porque juntos logramos más.
Estos esfuerzos colectivos de planificación del crecimiento y de la transformación de la ciudad dan origen a los distritos de oportunidad, para enfrentar los desafíos futuros y satisfacer las necesidades humanas de los habitantes, con servicios cercanos que fomenten la vida en comunidad y reduzcan la necesidad de largos desplazamientos, utilizando tecnologías que mejoren la calidad de vida y disminuyendo los riesgos y la vulnerabilidad ante situaciones adversas. Los distritos de oportunidad también promueven la educación y la formación técnica, fomentando la capacidad para generar empleo y provocar emprendimientos, y facilitando la recreación y la actividad cultural. Es decir, estos distritos de oportunidad mejorarán la calidad de vida de los habitantes, favoreciendo el desarrollo humano integral en la ciudad.
El nuevo modelo de planificación urbana ya empezó y ya estamos dando los primeros pasos para la implementación de los distritos de oportunidad. La propuesta surge a partir de un análisis de aquellos territorios con potencial y con oportunidades para su transformación.
La ciudad compacta es esa oportunidad que se nos da en la ciudad de poder vivir cerca de donde trabajamos o entretenernos cerca de donde estudiamos. Y eso nos da a nosotros la calidad de vida.
Hemos definido una ruta de implementación que incluye varios procesos, desde la identificación y consolidación de la vocación de esos territorios, la implementación de estrategias territoriales de forma integral, el uso eficiente de recursos, una estrategia de comunicación y participación, así como también de instrumentos y mecanismos de gestión y de financiamiento. Las estrategias territoriales que se implementan en los distritos de oportunidad tienen que ver con la movilidad, la vialidad, el espacio público, el medio ambiente, la vivienda, la administración de vulnerabilidades y emergencias, los servicios básicos y los equipamientos urbanos. Todo articulado por estrategias de forma más amplia, como son el desarrollo económico, la resiliencia, la sostenibilidad y la innovación.
3 son entonces los principios para generar la ciudad compacta. Uno es la proximidad, tener las actividades cercanas para mejorar nuestra calidad de vida. El segundo, muy importante, es la innovación, que nos permite replantearnos estas nuevas formas de llevar a cabo las actividades en la ciudad. Y el tercero, muy importante, es esa capacidad máxima que se tiene para poder desarrollar un territorio. 7 son los territorios que se han seleccionado como proyectos piloto para estos distritos de oportunidad. 2 al norte, el Vía Norte y U6, 2 al centro, el Distrito Central y Tívoli, y 2 al sur, el Distrito 711 y el Distrito Vía 12. Y un distrito, el Gran Distrito Verde, muy importante, que será el articulador y el conector de todos estos distritos con las áreas verdes de la ciudad de Guatemala.
Al planificar la ciudad del futuro y construir la ciudad para vivir, se busca proteger los recursos y hacerlos eficientes para desarrollar una ciudad activa, que funcione bien y que favorezca que los habitantes aumenten su orgullo de pertenencia y, en consecuencia, generen identidad ciudadana. Los 6 distritos de oportunidad y el Gran Distrito Verde que los enlaza tienen en común 3 pilares fundamentales: mejorar la calidad de vida de los ciudadanos, impulsar el empleo y el emprendimiento, y brindar oportunidades dándoles una mano a los jóvenes. Los distritos de oportunidad ya se están proyectando y se ejecutarán a lo largo de los próximos 30 años, beneficiando a 3 generaciones de personas que viven en nuestra ciudad. Para implementarlos, la municipalidad trabajará con la iniciativa privada, la cooperación internacional y el gobierno central, impulsando su desarrollo al invertir en programas estratégicos de innovación tecnológica, proporcionando servicios inteligentes en la iluminación pública, el sistema de semáforos y la conectividad en los espacios públicos. Se incluyen las nuevas opciones de movilidad y transporte público, como las bicirrutas, el metrorriel y el aerometro. Adicionalmente, se consideran el reciclaje y la pulverización de desechos y la captación de agua de lluvia, el reuso de aguas grises, la transformación de energía y la forestación de los territorios. Los distritos de oportunidad contarán también con diversos equipamientos culturales para aumentar las oportunidades de desarrollo personal y mejorar la calidad de vida en su territorio.
Mucho crédito al grupo municipal que está detrás de toda esta cuestión, que están haciendo un excelente trabajo, están aportando mucho de sus ideas y de su tiempo, y siento que todo es muy positivo, y esperamos nada más que en alguna forma los vecinos colaboren con el grupo es lo que se va a tratar de hacer, de tener un contacto más directo con ellos y de poder entonces brindarles a ellos todas las facilidades de una mejor calidad de vida para la ciudad. Hay retos muy fuertes, pero creo que se están abarcando, que se están tratando de solucionar y se está tratando de planificar hacia el futuro. Yo siento que a mí lo que me interesa muchísimo, obviamente, es dejarles encaminado, pues, lo más posible, colaborando, pues, con la municipalidad y con otras entes, para que nuestros nietos, nuestros hijos y nuestros nietos puedan disfrutar lo que yo considero que, y más de lo que yo considero que yo disfruté cuando era joven.
Los padres, los abuelos, los hijos y los nietos compartirán estas transformaciones en la ciudad, que con los nuevos equipamientos urbanos y las mejoras en los espacios públicos provocarán la recuperación de la vida barrial y la convivencia, promoviendo los usos mixtos en los espacios privados y generando nuevas opciones de vivienda, que nos permitirán a todos disfrutar de una ciudad más humana y sostenible. Esta visión de mediano y largo plazo que propone los distritos de oportunidad garantizan una mejor calidad de vida en la ciudad, para que los vecinos se desarrollen y realicen sus sueños y cumplan sus metas, colaborando en armonía y en paz. Lo lograremos trabajando entre todos, porque juntos logramos más. Cada día, desde muy temprano, la ciudad de Guatemala atiende a 3.5 millones de ciudadanos que trabajan, estudian y buscan generar oportunidades en este centro urbano tan concurrido, que provee los servicios públicos y...
Okay, Mayor Ricardo Quiñones and the municipality team have been working on a strategic urban planning for the next 30 years, as you have seen in the video, and has created the Opportunity District as a response of the sprawl of Guatemala City that seeks to improve the quality of life of all the neighborhoods. As the mayor says, we may not agree in ideologies, but we do agree on a common cause that is Guatemala City. And that's why the purpose of all these actions are to improve the quality of life, a quality of life that promotes and achieves opportunities, especially for the youngest, because we are living a demographic bonus at a national level that prioritizes the generation of employment and that ensures that all this urbanization and development effort can be sustainable in the future. As you have seen also in the video, Guatemala City, excuse me? Guatemala City, since its foundation in this valley, is located at a very important crossroads that are four strategic roads for commerce, logistic, and industry. And the plan that we are executing includes a vision for the future of Guatemala City, a vision that where there are potential areas of development because the city is the economic engine of the country. This role of economic engine has prevailed throughout the expansion process of the city until it became a metropolitan area that extends over several municipalities. This metropolitan region constitutes a single functional basin of habitat and employment, which imposes great challenges for the central city, that is Guatemala City. We are experiencing a process of urbanization on a global scale, which indicates that 75% of the population will live in cities by the year 2050. And for Guatemala, it is estimated that it will be 80%. We are also experiencing a demographic bonus process at the country level, as I mentioned earlier, which implies that we will have a mainly young population which needs opportunities for the future. Our response from Guatemala City to these processes is the Opportunity District. This proposal seeks to consolidate urban centralities, not only at the city level, but at the region level, at the metropolitan level. And this new plan for Guatemala City seeks to contain the urban sprawl by creating a polycentric city model, or polycentric regional model. The metropolitan challenge is already addressed through the municipality associations of the South and of the North, and the aim is to promote a central region city. But from the municipality, we focus on the central city, that is Guatemala City. As explained in the video, every day from very early in the morning, Guatemala City serves 3.5 million of citizens who work, study, and look for better opportunities in the urban center. In a territory of 2,028 square kilometers, Guatemala City has a population of 1 million and an additional 1 million of commuters that visit the central city to reach their workplaces and to reach services and cultural services, administration services, education services also. The majority of the population moves towards a central corridor that concentrates the services, the employment, and commerce. This central corridor concentrates 62% of the companies and 60% of the workers, imposing great challenges on the functioning of the city, such as traffic management. And if we review the real estate in the last 10 or 11 years, we can see that the real estate has been concentrated in traditional areas as Zone 10, Zone 14, Zone 15, 17. We start to concentrate in zones 11 and 12, leaving aside territories with an opportunity for transformation where the market has not gone, but which have a great potential. And the leadership and mechanisms are needed to guide development toward these territories. So Guatemala City is conformed by 40% of developed areas that we call the Central District, which is served daily by the municipal administration. Guatemala City is conformed by another 30% of a natural green network that surrounds the city that we have called traditionally ecological belt. But in this proposal, we call it the Great Green District that seeks to reconnect the urban areas to the green areas and with an environmental potential. The city has identified another 20% of the territory as an area with a big opportunity of development and transformation under this new model of urban planning based on the concept of the compact city. This is the model that is promoted by the Opportunity Districts. The districts are strategic areas of development to lead the transformation of the city in the coming years, attract investment, entrepreneurship, innovation, resilience, and sustainability. Each district has its own potential and vocation, and in addition to having a role at the city level, it seeks to meet the needs of the neighborhood at the local level in a comprehensive development strategy. The opportunity districts are based on the compact city model or nearby city that has been in the international debate in the last years in the context of pandemic. But this concept of compact city is the city where people can live, work, study, enjoy, and do all their daily activities within the city, mobilizing to one place to another in a short time period. Having all close by our daily activities give us a better quality of life. We have identified the opportunity districts according to their own qualities based on their strategic location and immediate surroundings. So we have 6 development districts and the Great Green District. The development districts, we have 2 of them to the north, of the city and have the opportunity for development and expansions, Via Norte and Nuceis in the north. Another 2 districts at the center of the city promote an urban renewal, but subject to specific regulations, such as Central District and Tivoli District. And 2 districts to the south and west linked to new massive public transportation systems, such as Aerometro and Metrorail. The districts are called Via 12 and 711. And all these 6 development districts will be connected by the Great Green Districts with low impact infrastructure. The Great Green Districts will connect through a network of green spaces, parks, ecological parks, and ravines within the city. The main concept of the opportunity districts is based in 3 pillars: proximity, innovation, and maximum occupancy. District concepts are linked to the well-use and management of resources, making the territory sustainable districts. Prosperity belts are identified areas to promote affordable housing around the opportunity districts. And in this way, people can live close to public transportation services, get into their jobs or schools, and all the opportunities within the city in a short period of time. As we explained in the video, we have 5 enabling projects that are related with transport, infrastructure, and housing. The first enabling project is the affordable housing throughout the prosperity belt that seeks to offer housing around the opportunity districts, giving the entire population the opportunity to live in the central city. The other enabling projects are the Aerometro, that is an aerial cable mobility system, the north-south axis over the railroad line that we call Metrorail, that is a light train system, the construction of the bridge Belize 2 in the north, and the execution of a set of overpasses to make this internal mobility effort viable in Guatemala City. And how are we doing it? The opportunity districts have already begun their impact in the city with important alliances made with private developers, landowners, companies, and international cooperation in search of funding the projects, all the project portfolio of the districts. We have defined an implementation route that includes several processes. First, the identification and consolidation of the vocation of these territories, then a communication and a participatory strategy, the implementation of territorial strategies in a comprehensive way, the well management of resources, seeking sustainability practices, management and funding mechanisms, as well as implementation of a portfolio of projects and activation events. The opportunity districts incorporate an action-oriented approach that seeks to publicize the proposal, implement it, and live it in a flexible public-private collaboration scheme. To finish, what do the opportunity districts solve? First, they propose the containment of urban sprawl by providing opportunities for constructive development in the central city. Second, the districts improve mobility in the city and in the region by providing new transport alternatives and active mobility at the local level. Third, they incentive the affordable housing by nearby services and promote a city of owners. Fourth, they propose a vision for the transformation of the city towards this model of compact city or city of proximity. Fifth, they create opportunities for young people and families and propose the creation of jobs. And sixth, they use sustainability as a basis to improve the quality of life in the city. The proposal of opportunity districts is integrated into the portfolio of projects for the entire city that will be continue having all the services and all the attention. This proposal cannot be carried out by a single actor, as the public sector. So this is a collaborative initiative involving companies, academia, landowners, private developers, international cooperation, in addition to the public sector, national and municipal. We are planning for 3 generations of people, the current one, our children and our grandchildren, seeking to impact 100% of the city territory. And that's all. And that's it. Excuse me for the English, but...
Thank you very much, Sylvia. Just a reminder, if you want to ask any questions to any of our guests today, we have to my right and left the QR codes where you can enter your questions. You can also find some, if you're following us through Facebook Live, you can also ask your questions, and you can upvote any questions that you would like to be on the top of the list. Scott Baer is a journalist who focuses on American urban issues. He is the CEO and owner of a media company called Market Urbanism Report, which advocates for free market urban policy. He also writes regular columns for Forbes, The Independent Institute, and The Tax Credit Advisor. He recently published his first book, Market Urbanism, A Vision for Free Market Cities. Rooted in classical liberalism, it posits that cities work best through the bottom-up, private sector activity of many individuals, not necessarily top-down government plans. He is currently traveling through the Southern Hemisphere researching cities for future articles and books. Please welcome Scott Baer.
Well, thank you so much to UFM for inviting me. This is really cool. I think it would be better if I started off with the 4th slide in this, just so you get some context. Yes, I'm a traveling journalist who is just started a 1.5-year tour through the quote-unquote global South. So I'm staying a half year in Latin America, traveling a half year through Africa, and another half year through Asia, ending in 2023. Why would I do something like this? Part of it is a journalism project. I've been writing about cities in the United States for about a decade, and I thought that traveling to different parts of the world will give me a different perspective on urban planning and urban policy. A secondary purpose of the trip, which you can bring up in the Q&A, is it's also a trip designed for investing. I'm very interested in the private city model that is growing. Basically, there's private cities that are being built in these parts of the world, and I view them as the future, potentially, of urbanism. And so I'm very interested in seeing these different private city models as I travel, which we can go over. So that is the trip. Guatemala City is the second stop. The first stop was a combo of Guadalajara, Mexico, and Mexico City. And so I'm basically just beginning, although I'm already sleep deprived. So the name of the talk is, What is Market Urbanism? And yeah, a little background. I'm a journalist who has been covering the urban policy beat in the United States for about a decade, writing for different magazines. And then I also, 5 years ago, started a media company called Market Urbanism Report. And it's designed to expand. So market urbanism is a larger cause that has existed for about 20 years. And it's a combo of different organizations. Market Urbanism Report was really designed to expand the market urbanism idea and really increase the number of issues that we covered. So Market Urbanism Report is a blog. We have weekly articles. We have social media following of about 50,000. And yeah, we have a podcast and all that sort of stuff. So you could You could call it a media company or even a minor think tank. So, what is market urbanism? It's a policy theory that applies free market economics to urban issues. I would say more specifically, it's a study of urbanism from a classical liberal perspective. So a lot of the people who inspired the market urbanism idea are people like Adam Smith and Friedrich Hayek. However, also Jane Jacobs is a huge influence in the market urbanism movement. Raise your hand if you've heard of Jane Jacobs. Okay, outstanding. Yeah, I mean, I basically view different people have different opinions of Jane Jacobs, but basically I view her as somebody who brought the Hayekian critique down to the level of the city block. And so I view her, she was very much of an inspiration for me personally and a lot of other market urbanists. So digging a little deeper, market urbanism is really there's really two angles here. So the first angle of market urbanism is the idea as a theory. And what we're effectively asking, getting back to the private city idea, is if cities operated entirely on anarcho-capitalistic or fully libertarian principles, if they did not have governments of a municipal nature, how would they work? And the reason that I call that a theory is because that's very seldom tested. A vast majority of the big cities around the world are in fact government run, they are democratically elected, or they might be autocratic. But the point being that governments are the ones that run cities in our current state. The market urbanism theory is asking, how would cities function if this were not the case? If you had, say, a private board of investors, or simply full decentralization on Web3 technology. So a lot of my trip is going to be looking for these different private cities that are testing this idea and seeing how they work. But the second angle of market urbanism that I think is more relatable to a typical city is a policy package. So in the United States, for example, I'm going into places like New York and San Francisco, and I'm saying, how can market urbanism be applied in these places? It's not going to be a full-on libertarianism. It's not going to be, anarcho-capitalism, but it's going to be specific reforms that kind of push in that direction in places like New York, San Francisco, Houston, that are more moderate examples of what market urbanism could be. So of those reforms, we have two things that we really focus on at MUR. One is housing and the other is transportation. So the basic idea of housing is it can be built in the location, at the size, in the design, and in the density that the consumer wants. So we'll say outright that's a little bit different than the presentation we just watched, where growth is being managed within very specific zones. This is the opposite. One thing that market urbanists go after is zoning. So I don't know how strong that really is in Guatemala City. It doesn't seem as strong, but in the United States, zoning is an incredibly powerful institution. If you buy a parcel in any given city, the zoning is going to determine how many homes can be built, what the use is, where it can sit on the lot, how it needs to look, so on and so forth. Zoning is an all-encompassing regulation in the United States. And the point being that market urbanists think that zoning should not exist. Parking minimums, another thing that market urbanists are against. Basically, these regulations that say that a certain number of parking stalls need to be put on a property relative to the square footage or the number of units. We're against that. Building codes, this is an interesting one. So building codes in theory might seem like a good thing because nobody wants to live in a building that is going to fall down. But I think in practice, again, at least in the United States, building codes are often excessive. they go beyond what really protects public health and safety. And so they add a great deal of expense to construction. And then I think in the worst case scenario, building codes are simply captured by special interests. For example, in Philadelphia, they used to have a building code that established that certain type of piping had to be put in the building that was not really necessary. And the people who lobbied for that were the labor unions who laid the pipes. So I think I view building codes as a form of regulatory capture. And I think the private sector can produce building codes that are just as good, but don't have all of these public choice flaws. Urban growth boundaries, so otherwise known as anti-sprawl policies or policies that try to contain urban sprawl. I actually view that as a bad thing. I think that particularly in the United States, maybe here in Guatemala City as well, urban growth boundaries necessarily limit the supply of land on which you can build housing. And that limits the amount of housing. And that drives up the price of housing. So if you want to make housing unaffordable, I think you would have a very tight urban growth boundary past which housing cannot be built. Other regulations that we go after are height. FAR means floor area ratio. It's basically the amount of land that a building can cover on a lot. And DUA limits are dwelling units per acre. So in plain English, we are against regulations that regulate the height of a building, the bulk of a building, and the number of units that can go in a building. And in the United States in particular, these types of regulations are imposed in really crucial areas like, say, San Francisco. There's heavy demand for living in San Francisco, but a large portion of the city is zoned in such a way that you can't even build like a 4-story building. And it drives people out into the sprawl. It drives people out into the suburbs and makes housing really expensive. But I think above all, the market urbanists are against the whole idea of planning and design review. Just the entire process that people have to go through if they want to build something. So say if you're a developer in New York City, you can't just buy the parcel and start constructing, even if that would have no problem. You're having to go through potentially years of review, and you're having to pay potentially millions of dollars in costs to get permits, go through the lobbying process, deal with lawsuits. Guess who all those costs get passed down onto? It gets passed down onto the consumer. It makes housing more expensive. So next is transportation. Transportation can be provided along the routes and the modes and via the operators chosen by the consumer. So again, very different than I think the earlier presentation and sort of the government line that is typically told about transportation, where it has to go along a specific path and has to be through a chosen route that has been selected by the government. I'm saying the opposite. The market provides, the consumer determines how they want to get around, and the market provides for them. So one of these is road pricing. In the United States, and probably here as well, I know in Mexico City I saw it, there is the issue of congestion. That is a tragedy of the commons. It's too many people wanting to use a specific public asset, and because the road is not priced at the point of use, you get congestion. In a market urbanism model, you would have market rate pricing based on the demand during the day. And what this causes is it causes congestion to disperse and the usage of the road to even out over the course of the day. So if the road is priced higher at 8 a.m., people might make their trips at 7 a.m. or 9 a.m. Public transit reform, basically saying that government-run transit often comes with a lot of flaws in the administration, and we call for aspects of public transit reform that would make them operate more like a business. But this is really the main one, private transit deregulation. So I will say outright that the market urbanists in the United States are very jealous of Latin America because we are impressed by your vast network of private buses. And like that, I mean, basically like just going to Mexico City and seeing all the paseros driving around and like these thousands of private buses, that is not something that is common in the United States. And primarily it's because it's not allowed. So Uber has tried to roll out bus lines, and various other entrepreneurs have tried to roll out bus lines in the United States, particularly in New York and San Francisco. And they have to do so in the shadows because, or they just don't do it at all because the government has written laws against it and basically said, no, you need to use our transit. You can't use the private versions. Market-based right-of-way. This has particularly to do with parking. So rather than having parking be free, and I don't know how much of a problem this is in Guatemala City, but it's a big problem in the US where people drive and expect to park for free. And then that causes a tragedy in the commons along the curb space where they can't find parking spots. And kind of like with the road situation, if you just price the curbs based on market pricing, then it'll free up the space in sort of an organic way that prevents people from having to cruise around to park. Conclusion. Cross between free market policy and urban issues, classical liberal tradition, private sector organic growth and voluntary exchange over government coercion and bureaucracy. And I think above all, it's prioritizing, I'd like to think of market urbanism as prioritizing the individual. If you have millions of individuals living in a city, they all have different priorities and they all have different preferences. And I think that their preferences are going to be best reflected if they can follow their desires in an organic way, rather than having government bureaucracies that might have a handful of people making decisions for them. So that is my book. If you want to buy it, it's an ebook on Amazon. And if you want to get involved in the movement, those are the socials. I think particularly the Facebook group. It's an 11,000 person group. It gets passionate, rabid conversation every single day by people who have very different opinions on these issues. And if you're interested in economics or urban issues, I strongly recommend you join that group. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Scott. Just as a reminder, we have the QR codes on either side. I already see that some of you have started with your questions. You can also upvote these questions to bring them up to the top of the list. So kind of to get things started, first I'd like to introduce Paola Constantino, of course. Paola has been teaching at UFM since 2012. She has given classes in urbanism, the School of Architecture, and the School of Business for our Masters in Real Estate Development, MAPI. She has recently been a facilitator in the Liberty in Action program in the university's CoLab. For many years, she worked in Guatemala City's municipal government, first in the design and development of urban projects, and then as assistant to the mayor in Zone 9, in one of these opportunity zones. She is now a part of the Accelerator Lab of the United Nations Development Program oriented to innovation through citizen solutions to development challenges. So thank you, Paola, for being here. Thanks, Sylvia, and thanks, Scott, for your presentations. So to get the ball rolling, I'd like to ask each of you, how would you define a city? How would you define a city? So Sylvia, Paola, would you like to start, or who would like to start?
I can go ahead. I think the city is us. I think the city is people. I think the city is the result of human exchange, of humans doing their activities, pursuing their own opportunities, trying to be happy. I would say that. Maybe it's a little bit cheesy, but I think that's what cities mean. Yes, its expression, physical expression, we might call it the urbs. However, there's no physical structure without the brilliance of humanity, their knowledge, their intelligence, and their will to find better opportunities, either for themselves or their families or their beloved ones. Yeah.
For me, thank you. Thank you. For me, the city may be the greatest creation of humanity. It has developed, it has became the most important habitat of the humanity. So it is the place for the well-being, for innovation, for interaction, and because of this, we must give the city the facilities and the opportunities to develop.
It's not going to sound like a real romantic definition, but I mean, basically, I think the primary purpose of a city is economic. I kind of think of cities as agglomerations, just collections of people who have come into a specific area to pursue their economic self-interests and specifically work jobs and produce things.
Okay, so what do you see as the biggest challenge of a city? What do you see as the biggest challenge of a city?
I guess just a person is one world already. So imagine to have, I don't know, you mentioned that we were 1.5 million people. So imagine having 1.5 million people getting along, getting into the same path, objectives, work along in harmony, share a territory, which, I mean, at the end, cities, we do have private territories, but we also have these open spaces that if they're not meant to be shared, they are needed to be shared. So I think harmony, I guess, is the biggest challenge, and I guess sometimes it's being answered or trying to be resolved by regulations, although sometimes they're not responding to people's demands or I would say will or preferences. So I guess that's the biggest challenge. One of the biggest challenges.
Yeah, kind of in the same vein. I mean, I think if you're going to have this collection of people who are all pursuing their economic self-interest, then you deal with the externality issue and the tragedy of the commons, sort of the spillovers that come from economic activity, and the question becomes, how do you prevent those things? It's a combination of regulation, it's a combination of market-based activity that tries to prevent those things or counter them. And so yeah, I think externalities would be the biggest issue.
For me, the main challenge of the city is to give opportunities and to give conditions to develop life. And I was thinking about Jane Jacobs, that she has una frase, I will say it in Spanish, Es como la ciudad ofrece oportunidades cuando todos se ven reflejados en esas oportunidades. It's something like that, the words of Jacob.
The city gives opportunities when it's reflected on the sum of the individuals. Is that what the quote is trying to explain, or can you say the quote again?
Ajá, es como la ciudad es buena cuando te ofrece oportunidades para todos. Algo
Okay.
así es como una frase de
Okay, the
Jim
city is
Jacobs.
good
Ajá.
when it offers opportunity to everyone.
Although I disagree.
You disagree?
Yeah,
Mhm.
because yeah, I think there are many other authors, and surprisingly, they are from the economic realm. And some of these authors have mentioned how the city, with some slums or these human settlements, might be perceived as a sign of poverty or a failure, but it's the otherwise. It's why these people are coming to the city. And maybe they're not yet reflected on the city responding to their will or their opportunities, but they are seeing maybe a path or a horizon where they can build new opportunities. So I think that's the power of cities. And I think, yeah, maybe relating to the economic theory, all the resources are scarce, in particular in a city. So I think that would be, again, another huge challenge.
So read Triumph of the City, Edward Glaser.
Of course.
Okay. Since you mentioned economics, in economics, we have to prioritize the use of limited resources. And there's several ways of doing this. One way is determining top-down how these limited resources are going to be used. And the other one is bottom-up, basically having the market define what are the priorities. And so these priorities can be determined through market mechanisms such as prices. And if people want more of something, you'll see a rise in price. And that will give opportunities to developers or anybody wanting to make money to incentivize this. How could you both elaborate on both points of view and talk to us a little bit about how these can play together, if possible?
Okay. Well, the city is a space of freedom and rights, and with the integration of multiple logics of different stakeholders. So each stakeholder has a role. For example, well, I work in the public sector, so I must I am near of the logic of the public sector, but the public sector has to ensure the common good and resolve conflicts, and therefore it is forced to force some attitudes or some how can I say, or some tendencies to assure the common good. But for example, the private sector has another logic, has another goal. So each actor, each stakeholder has its role, and we must integrate. And I think that we need that someone that someone could have the leadership or conduct. Excuse me for my English. I am thinking, but I will say it in Spanish. Pues sí, se necesita alguien que dirija, que articule la lógica de los diferentes actores. No son buenas ni malas. La lógica del sector privado, si es la de la renta, o la lógica de la población es la de la sobrevivencia, la de vivir bien. Ninguna lógica es ni buena ni mala, pero necesitamos a alguien que la logre articular, que mire por ese bien común. Y siento que ese bien común debe integrar y aceptar las diferentes lógicas y darles un espacio a todas ellas.
Okay, I'm going to summarize what Sylvia just said, just so you can be on the same page. So Sylvia basically is saying that there needs to be somebody who can articulate the ideas, the wants that each one of these parties has, all towards what you refer to as the common good. Does that sum it up pretty well? Before you answer, I just wanted to ask you, who determines what is the common good? Who determines it?
Buena pregunta. Well, well, I think it's the public sector, because I work in the public sector, and I think we have the capacity of determining the common good, but there are different points of view.
Yeah, I mean, I think who determines the good is the people themselves, and I don't view the public sector, based on what role should the private versus the public sector have. It should, to me, the public sector should be very minimal, because it does not, in fact, in my opinion, reflect the views of the common people. I think it reflects the views of people who work in the administration and who have the sort of insularity of thinking of people who work in those bureaucracies. And just basic public choice theory says that people within the public sector often pursue their own interests, and they have a slush fund of money that they can access to called the general fund, and they're kind of working in their own self-interest that, in my opinion, don't necessarily overlap with the interests of the broader public. Whereas I think that if you talk about the private sector broadly defined, if you're talking about millions of businesses or thousands of businesses within a city, that's a much more diverse way of expressing the public will, because you're talking about thousands of goods and services being presented. You're talking about consumers who decide which goods and services are worth it to them, as opposed to a very select elite group of people who are making decisions.
Well, I think that history has also taught us, and I think that the perspective of having a mastermind who knows better what it is the common good for everyone else, it's actually urbanism, not only theory, but urbanism applied, such as modernism with Le Corbusier. He was a great architect. However, he, in his own mind, and he was a great, intellectual, and he believed that he knew better than the rest of the maybe ordinary people that maybe wouldn't be allowed to go to an architecture school like these students, for instance. But history has taught us that actually trying to plan in a center way, in a top-down way, what happens is that we create a bigger conflict between people, because we have to be humble enough as urbanists, as any professional, that people know better their choices. And sometimes, yeah, we most of the people, we look for economic pursue or development, but maybe some others want to maybe meet their future husband, and that's why they go to a city. Maybe other people want to have a healthcare treatment for their daughter, and it only happens on the city. So I think what it is a little bit, I would say, ¿cómo se dice? Arrogante, a little bit arrogant, to try to think that we can understand all those matters of different people with different needs, different backgrounds, cultures. And what I think is that what the urban policies are really meant to do is to provide the conditions so anybody can search their own solutions. That's my point of view.
It was my understanding from the presentation that the municipal government defined these opportunity districts through what was actually going on in these districts. So I imagine, maybe you can elaborate a little bit more on this, but I imagine that they started seeing a certain amount of activity from developers, and they looked at an opportunity and said, okay, this is attracting a certain amount of investment. There's geographically, there are certain connections that make this an interesting space. Could you elaborate on what were all these dynamics that were going on to determine, okay, this is definitely an opportunity district? This isn't probably an opportunity district at this moment. Can you elaborate on that?
Okay, I will answer in Spanish. For me, it's better. Sí, justamente.
If you could take your time, I would prefer you answer in English
Okay.
so it's Scott is
Okay, I will
on the
try.
same page.
So the opportunity districts has been defined by the needs of the city, but also because there is an opportunity to develop. And there are some stakeholders and landowners that has seen the opportunity in these territories. So it's a combination. So they are, the opportunity districts are some territories that needs to be transformed, but because there is an opportunity in these territories that the developers has seen the opportunity.
And as a follow-up question, could the whole city be viewed as an opportunity district? Because
Yes.
sometimes certain developers focus on a particular area because land prices were accessible, and then maybe other areas fall beyond their scope of attraction, but they might have a lot of interest from the general public to develop these areas. Have you considered the possibility of being more open and not focusing the attention specifically on these opportunity districts?
Yes, sure. We see these opportunity districts as the proyectos piloto, pilot projects, as the pilot projects to transform the city with this concept of the compact city. But of course, all the city has the opportunity to be transformed and to be considered as an opportunity. But the territory of the opportunity districts is not completely developed. And we are trying to conduct all the 80% of the real estate to the 20% of the territory that is confirmed by the opportunity districts.
If I may add, because I was a former collaborator in the municipality, like for instance, the District 9, which is called Tivoli. Okay, I was pursuing to kind of open this district to new incentives. So we are speaking about that, okay, with the current conditions, this is not building, this is not redeveloping. So what were some of the conditions we consider? First is one of the central parts in the whole Guatemala City as the end point of all national routes and the people who commute from all the metropolitan area to Guatemala City. So we were receiving more than 200,000 people per day, just to work in Zone 9, Zone 10, as their final end and destination. And other, likewise, that was the where they picked the bus up to get back to their hometowns, which are 2 hours from Zone 9. So we were thinking, okay, we have this land underused. What if we transform this into an opportunity where people could come over and maybe have a chance to afford a house? But that is kind of a very difficult equation, because you have to see land price, you have to see what is the income of these people who are living already 2 hours away from Guatemala City. So we have to see the regulation, and the regulation, this is the case for Zone 9, it's completely strict. I mean, we have the airport kind of
landing cone.
The landing cone, but we also have other restrictions that doesn't allow you to build more. So I think it's more than, I would say, opportunity district. I would say it's a wonderful study case on how it can open up if we consider other urban policies, such as the ones that Scott was mentioning during his presentation. What do we need to actually boost that land to get redeveloped because it's already developed. Underused, of course, it has lost a lot of value. So that's another case why we are losing value within the city. It used to be one of the most expensive neighborhoods in Guatemala City back in the 70s, in the 80s, still a little bit on the 90s. What happened? Why today nobody wants to go there? So I think it's maybe it will be interesting to see what the market has to say about this zone. And if nobody wants it, I think that's already a reason to pick other places.
To kind of give you an idea, Scott, Zone 9 is directly west of Zone 10. And in between is Avenida La Reforma, which is one of the major north-south axes. And it's incredible because you see something similar between Zone 14 and Zone 13. So Zone 10, as we were talking earlier, has been extremely developed. There's a huge amount of development there. Originally housing, then a mixture of businesses, restaurants. It's called the Zona Viva. A good part of it is called Zona Viva. And then to the west, we have Zone 9, which for many reasons probably has become relatively stagnant. One of them being what Paola mentioned is the limits in height because of the airport. It cuts the axis of the airport cuts right through a big part of it. And this will lead me to another question from the audience, and is that sometimes certain things that are meant to help a city, in this case traffic, sometimes hurt the city. In Guatemala, we have a big traffic problem, and the way that, or one of the ways that that the municipal government has tried to attack this problem is with underpasses. Okay, so we have many underpasses that have contributed to make traffic a little bit more agile at that point specifically, but also there's a problem with them in that the area around the underpass becomes less pedestrian, or it tends to create a boundary between areas, and one of the sides might develop more, the other one might stagnate. Would you guys like to elaborate a little bit on that problem?
Well, I'd be curious to hear if the city government has thought about capping this. I don't know if you're familiar with this policy, but literally building a park over the underpass. It's called capping highways. Done in Seattle, Dallas.
Boston did that.
Exactly. That's probably the best known one.
Mm-hmm.
The big dig. It's really expensive, but basically, yeah, you build infrastructure over. It's oftentimes parkland. And then I think another aspect of that can be beneficial is the idea of selling air rights. So if there's land close to the underpass that is being underutilized, selling the air rights and allowing it potentially development over the underpass or close to the underpass, and then the revenue from that is used to pay off what is usually quite a high price of doing the project. So I don't know if you've done that or not, but it's a thing in the U.S. and I saw it in Monterrey, Mexico as well.
Okay. We also have 2 microphones here in the audience if anybody wants to ask questions directly.
Many students have questions, I know.
One of the questions we have from the audience is related to the transportation projects, and the question goes around: what comes first, the development in the opportunity project district, or the transportation? What's the plan?
Well, we think that we need both at the same time in a parallel development, because the transportation new projects are enabling projects of the districts, but at the same time, we don't have all the demand, the potential demand to use the transportation system if we don't develop the districts. So we need it both at the same time. So we need.
The chicken or the egg? Sí. Okay. Another question from the audience. How do we prevent urban sprawl but still, I'm sorry. How do we prevent urban sprawl but still have affordable housing?
I think that goes to Scott.
Okay. Well, I don't know that preventing urban sprawl is a goal unto itself. I mean, particularly in the United States, urban sprawl is very, very common, and I view it as it's some combination of socialism in the sense that we built a lot of roads and we kind of socialized the cost of infrastructure, and so I'm very against that. But then I think on the other hand, it's simply a market preference. I mean, as societies get more wealthy, they want bigger houses, they want yards, they want cars, and I would rather just say, if it's going to happen, allow it to happen, but at the same time, don't subsidize it. So it's sort of, that's the weird thing about really a lot of US cities, is that some jurisdictions draw their urban growth boundaries and it becomes a very anti-sprawl policy that drives up home costs. And then other jurisdictions actually subsidize sprawl and it becomes this huge, environmental issue. And I guess I would rather just say, don't subsidize things, price the externalities, and let the market work.
Maybe I would ask something different. I mean, we think about sprawl as a negative thing of the city becoming wider and bigger, expanding in the horizon. However, what if we promote or come up with the right incentives to bring other enterprises into those places around the belt, not in a center which is full, is packed, it's already, we have all these problems of traffic. So we actually think about building a polycentric system rather just a one-centered system.
I'm going to elaborate on that. I normally just ask questions, but I would like to give my opinion on this. I see traffic as part of the process of changing the paradigms of citizens. So instead of trying to make traffic more agile, which just pushes the problem further ahead, I think traffic actually changes people's mindsets in terms of where they want to live and where they want to work and consume. So if we're eventually going to have to spend hours and hours in our car, maybe we don't want to live in a house with a garden. We want to live in an apartment that is close by, and that eventually will lead to further development in a polycentric way. Anna, we have a question here.
Yes, hello. My question is related to, well, the idea that there is this problem in Latin America of the lack of social housing. Now, when we think about that idea, and we have the example of Europe in the past, in the modern era, where there was a lot of social housing being developed, and in the end, people didn't want to live there. They wanted to make their own decisions of where and how to live. In Latin America, we have large areas of informal urban development. And as you know, in Brazil, for example, there are these large areas that are the favelas. Do you see in those areas some sort of market urbanism taking place? Because it is largely unregulated and people basically organize, not perhaps in the best way, but maybe there are some opportunities there that we are not seeing right now.
Yeah, thank you. And I mean, a lot of the reason I'm taking this trip is to see these kinds of things firsthand, so I can have a more informed opinion. We don't have favelas in the United States, so it's hard for me to even give a frame of reference. Something similar we have is something like trailer parks, which are little basically plastic modular homes that are extremely cheap, and they tend to be more informal, and it's where low-income people live. Of course, it has been made illegal in many jurisdictions that don't want poor people in the so-called blight of trailer homes to be focused there. But yeah, I see that as kind of, I think when I do end up getting to go to the favelas, I'll see the version of that to extremes, and it'll be really interesting to see how it fits in with market urbanism and what are the strengths and weaknesses of this model.
Maybe I want to add to Anna's question. I think these favelas, or we have a lot of human settlements here in Guatemala that can relate to the same concept. And I think that it's a sign of people's needs. And when regulations are so stricted or provoke certain patterns of development, people will respond, or the market will respond as water. You know, water flows in whatever place it can. The only thing that I maybe would be asking myself is what happens when invasion of private property happens, because, okay, then we are talking about something else. But if no private property invasion is taken, I think it's a sign of what a spontaneous city looks like. And I recommend strongly to read Edward Glaser. He has another chapter on the fabulous entrepreneurships that comes along in these favelas. And he made a study case on Brazil. So I think it's extraordinary what happens there, because there's, again, human exchange, knowledge exchange, and the needs that they have, maybe they think more creatively in a certain ways.
I do have one more thing to add real quick about that, is that an official from the UN once went into San Francisco to look at the homeless situation. She said it was the worst thing she had ever seen. She had never seen anything like this, even in the third world. And she said she felt like the reason that homelessness had gotten so bad in San Francisco is because the city does not allow any informal settlement that can be done from the bottom up organically to fit people's needs. And so people literally just form tent cities on the street that have no security at all. And so I guess you could say it's like it's an anecdote to homelessness for the extremely low income.
Okay, we're running a little bit over time, but we have two more questions. Cassandra?
Thank you. I'm giving design this semester and thinking of when our students are going to have their office. Will be probably in maybe 5 years. So a discussion or something that we're going to have is, what do you see in the future for the city? It sounds very interesting for me that you're traveling and seeing these different countries, going to Latin America. If you find that we're years apart from what's going to happen. But anyway, I just want to know if you have any predictions on what things will definitely change in the future and what things might stay the same. I know human beings will stay the same, but anyway, thank you.
Well, yeah, I mean, the theme, like, I could have taken a trip to Europe or Canada, but I didn't do that for a reason. I view the global South as like, that's kind of the future. Like, Latin America is growing really fast. It has a younger population. That's even more the case with Africa, Asia as well. And so it's sort of like, I guess I'm very bullish on this area of the world. And it seems like, for example, like a lot of the technologies that have been adopted in the United States, cryptocurrency, Web3, even automated checkout, all those types, the use of mobile telephones and credit cards and everything, it's sort of like spreading down into Latin America and other parts of the developing world. And I think it's going to completely change the quality of life and make the living standards much higher. So it's sort of like the population growth mixed with the advancements in technology and business. I view it as really a positive thing, and that's why I'm traveling through.
And one final question.
Thank you. More than a question, it's probably a reflection and a contribution of what I saw in the panel. Thank you, Scott, for your presentation. Fantastic. Thank you, Sylvia, also for the presentation. I tend to concur with everything you said in the policies of the market urbanism, and as a experience that I remember I participated on was the making of the plot for Canton Exposición. Basically, Guatemala City has since the early 2000s a form-based code where zoning is more in terms of intensity of building more than in separation of uses. It's pro mixed use, and but it has some things that don't work, and we were trying to stimulate the development of a central district back in the 2008, and we managed to do a local ordinance for a portion of the city, where basically what we did is we deregulated some aspects, and I think it worked very well as an idea. If you want to trigger zone 9, say, or the other zones that you want to trigger, instead of proposing incentives that are sort of imagined from the top down that actually don't work in the market, probably just deregulate some aspects, and buildings are going to start popping up. Basically, in zone 4, what we deregulated is exactly the parking requirement. There's no parking requirement at all in that portion. So you can build buildings of only apartments or offices with no parking. And then next to it, you can build a garage if the market wants it. And that allows for much cheaper structure systems, and I would say it's probably a solution, not for affordable housing, but less expensive real estate in the city, which makes it more inclusive. Definitely, deregulating Guatemala City is over-regulated, way over-regulated, and every time it's harder to get permits for construction, and it's making real estate much more expensive every time. So definitely, the parking requirement should be zero, everywhere in the whole city, zero parking requirement completely. If you want to expand the mall, how much parking do I have to add? None anymore. I'm going to add 3,000 parking spots because the mall won't work without 3,000 parking spots extra. You're going to add them? Okay, now you're going to pay extra taxes for those 3,000, and that like paying for the parking at the mall, instead of being 20 queues, should be 25. And 5 should be for the municipality in order to promote. If you tax the automobile, maybe you can get a cash flow for public transportation in the process of turning the city into a less car-oriented city. Much less viaducts for automobiles and much more taxing the vehicle. Also the idea of the superillas of basically the 400 square meter super block for the vehicle, and restricting the vehicle to traverse the city every 400 meters instead of every 100 meters. Every street be open to the car. You take out 2 out of 3 streets in the city, and you make them pedestrian, and you allow the car only to penetrate to make it to the house. But take out two streets of every 3 for traversing the city in the car. You're automatically making a city less car-oriented, which will make much more affordable real estate. But basically deregulating. And when you take out space that you're using for the car, you're automatically unsubsidizing the vehicle use in the city. When you have to pay for so much traffic lights and so much traffic management people and building infrastructure, underpasses infrastructures for the vehicle, you're using a lot of resources to subsidize the use of the vehicle. If you take out space of the vehicle and it's more pedestrian oriented, you're de-subsidizing the use of the vehicle. That's my reflections. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Sylvia. Thank you very much, Scott. Thank you very much, Paola. And thank you guys for sticking around. Have a good day.
Thank you. Cuarto año.